Hi everyone, this is April Forts and this webinar is our January 2017 and tonight we are going to talk about problem solving and standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8. So before we get started into this, something I want to share with you is we have this Iowa Core Standards to Assessment Target Alignment tool, and this is going to help you to understand the resources that we have on the Iowa Core website under the summative assessment. Now, I understand that some of us might be concerned about currently the Smarter Balance pause button being pushed and what that means for all of us. However, fortunately, we have really been making our focus about the content standards and the standards for mathematical practices and how we can best align that to instruction, because we know that research says the number one thing that will impact student achievement in the classroom is good instruction. So we want to make sure that our instruction is aligned to the assessments, that we're using the standards for mathematical practices, and that we're making positive changes for our kiddos. So as you will see, this guide is in draft form, and this is not to say that this is how you should do it or that this is the only model. This is just a collection of some really great work, and as you are in your districts and perhaps you've used the model of power standards or priority standards or essential standards or unpacking and repacking and all those various things, this guide, alignment guide, will help you to reflectively look at it and just assess whether or not the rigor, the focus, and the coherence is where you would like it to be for your students. So it has many parts, and part one I'm going to skip over but just mention because this was really our December webinar that we focused on the content standards, and that webinar is available on the coaching website, so you can go back and watch that if you were unable to attend. So tonight we're going to talk about, as I said, the standards for mathematical practices, problem solving, practice 1, 5, 7, and 8. A little bit of background, because of all the different assessments out there and all the different claims that many resources make to being aligned to the standards, I wanted to explain where these assessment targets came from. And these were developed by a task team of national experts and vetted by 200 different educators and organizations. And you can see those details here under the content specifications. And if you open this document up, which is also on our Iowa Core website, you can see that this work was done around the state standards, and it was consortium work and also a technical advisory committee. And if you scroll through this document, and it's 73 pages, so grab a cup of coffee on a Saturday, because I'm sure this is the best thing that you had to do is to read this whole document, and I have read it. So you'll notice some big names here as far as people who are seen as kind of the gurus in math education, some of them. So here, this one is from Shell Center, University of California at Berkeley. We have National Center on Educational Outcomes at the University of Minnesota. Shelby Cole, who has an amazing skill set. When Steve Leinwand left Connecticut, and Steve Leinwand was the lead author for Principles to Action, which we're getting ready to launch as our statewide PD for effective math practices for teachers in June. She filled Steve's shoes. So she stepped into being the Connecticut state lead into some really big shoes. After that, Shelby then went to Smarter Balance, and now she is the lead of the math team at Achieve the Core. So Shelby really has done many things and has a very unique skill set. Also, then there's Jason Zimba from Student Achievement Partners, which was one of the leads for writing the math standards, and Bill McCollum. And let's see who else that we have here that some of us online might know. Phil Darrow was also another lead. And so all these national experts got together and they worked on this. And so also then there was a vetting of 200 individual organizations that offered feedback on the drafts of these content specifications. So you can look through here and see all the different organizations that worked on this and vetted it. So we have ACT, we have College Board in there as we go down through. We have Pearson, we have West Ed. So many different educational organizations worked on this, provided feedback. It was not just a couple of people sitting in a dark room making this stuff up. And then additionally, it goes through and you can see where they break down and all their rationale for everything and evidence of each claim. So this work was really done in conjunction to support what was being done as far as getting ready to write assessments that were aligned with Smarter, Balanced, PARCC. Now Achieve the Core is doing much of that work and supporting the field with great resources. So I just share this with you, and if you scroll down to about page 14, you'll also get to where you'll see some of the research that they used in here, and it was like we've got some Wiggins and principles of evidence-centered design for assessment, learning progression frameworks, universal design for learning, cognitive rigor with depth of knowledge and deep learning, interim assessment, formative assessment with heritage, constructing questions and tasks for technology platforms. So a lot of really great people worked on this. And so it isn't about a particular assessment. It is about offering our students instruction in the classroom that's aligned to the standards that really have the integrity of that focus, coherence, and rigors that the authors of the standards and those that were part of making the progression documents and coherence maps, really bringing all that to fruition. So then I walk you through on this document kind of some vocabulary to set up our prior knowledge with our standards and our practice standards. Then we look at how we take the content standards and keep those in claim 1. And then you'll notice here in claim 2 through 4, we take those standards for mathematical practices and we break those up into sections. So for this webinar, we're going to talk about problem solving. So we're going to be looking at 4 standards for mathematical practices. And as we scroll through, then we get into depth that the students can solve a range of complex, well-posed problems in pure and applied mathematics, making productive use and problem-solving strategies. So what does well-posed problems mean? Well, that means that everything that the student needs to solve that problem is contained in that information. So this first part, as we go through here, we pick a target. Now again, we did not include this in December's webinar, so if you did watch December's, you did not get this information, and I'm just going to connect it because then we need to build on it for our problem solving. So this walks you through understanding the different documents and those blue and white sheets that are super duper helpful. And I'm going to just open that up because we're going to need that later, and then we'll have that already. And so then as we scroll through here, we tell you how to read those documents, and you'll see this draft form was just updated on 1/10/17. And then we talk about all the classroom resources and the information that you can get from the resources that we have on the website to further understand what those standards really are, and the vertical alignment and achievement level descriptors and all that great important information. And so this is just screenshots so that as you go through the documents and as you watch the webinar, this will help you out some. So that's this first part, this first section. And then we also give some explanations of what we mean by some of the vocabulary so that we can make sure that everybody understands and that we're all on the same page. And then we have this little template. So after you look at the example of the standard we use, then you can go through and use your own standard. So then you get to part 2, which is aligning the standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8 to problem solving assessments. Again, we talked about what those well-posed problems means. Everything that the students needs to know to solve the problem is listed. And we're going to look at these practice standards here. So number 1 is make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Number 5 is use the appropriate tools strategically. Number 7 is look for and make use of structure. And number 8 is look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. So again, if you've watched my webinars, you know I like to take everything through the 3rd grade. So in order to get to this problem solving information for Claim 2, we would go to the assessment target page on the Iowa Corps website, and I give you a screenshot. And then you would open up the grade 3 targets defined, right where we found the Claim 1 last month for those content targets. And then, so it would look like this. And it says scroll down the page until you see Claim 2, problem solving assessed targets A through D. And so it's going to look like this. And it says read the descriptors. Students can solve a range of complex, well-posed problems in pure and applied mathematics, making productive use of knowledge and problem solving strategies. So we get to step 5, and it says, notice the assessment targets A through D for Claim 2 problem solving. And I list them here for you, but we're actually going to go over to the Iowa Corps page and look at them through there. And it says, attention to the assessment targets A through D are important because they are considered the primary targets for Claim 2 category. Content standards and standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8 are embedded within the problem solving assessment targets. So what that means is we don't have to actually, as teachers and principals and coaches or whoever, we don't have to look for evidence of these individual standards for mathematical practices, because if we focus on the assessment targets, then we will have, those are embedded within them. Step 7 is notice that 80% of Claim 2 problem-solving questions will come from the following content assessment targets. And I list those out. Remember, M's are for major or priority clusters, and the S's are for supporting. So if 80% lend themselves to problem-solving, then this means the other 20% could come from those targets or any of the rest of them. Notice the range achievement level descriptors for Claim 2. So just like in our content standards, we had achievement level descriptors. We also have achievement level descriptors for problem solving. And then step 10 is example of Claim 2 problem solving questions can be found at the end of the assessed targets for content used during part 1. And that is the part 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow those directions, and we're going to go to our Iowa Corps website here, and I'm just going to back out to make sure we all know how to get to here. So we go to Iowa Corps, and then we go over here to the Educator Resources, and we want to be on the math page. And when you get to the Math Resources page, you go to Assessments, and we go under Summative. And then we're going to use 3rd grade, so we're going to jump to 3rd grade targets. And Claim 1 was what we talked about last week, or last month. This was our content standards. But we know that we have our standards and our standards for mathematical practices. So when we get to the Claim 2 section, as we scroll down the page, we see that it has 4 assessed targets A through D. So again, we have our descriptor. And now our targets are A through D here. And what's nice about this work being done is it has DOK levels already with it. So we, as educators, we don't even have to identify those. Now, this is not the only model, and I'm not saying that this is how you do it. I'm offering this to you as a resource. So as you do your work, you can have a reflective process and say, you know, where is my instruction lining up with implementing those standards and the standards for mathematical practices, and really focusing on the shifts with the rigor, focus, and coherence. So target A is apply mathematics to solve well-posed problems in pure mathematics and those arising in everyday life, society, and the workplace. So we have a DOK level, depth of knowledge, of 2 and 3 there. Target B is to select and use tools, appropriate tools strategically, a DOK 1 and 2. Remember, this is 3rd grade. Interpret results in the context of a situation, DOK 2, and identify important quantities and practical situations and map their relationships using diagrams, two-way tables, graphs, flowcharts, or formulas. DOK 1, 2, and 3. So these are already there. So we don't have to focus on the DOK level. We don't have to focus on the standards for mathematical practices 1, 5, 7, and 8. We need to focus on, if we want our kids to be good problem solvers, these are the targets that we want to hit, right? And so then what we do is we then take these targets and we use those to write really good problems. And then we can write these problems, and then we take the content in third grade and we stick it into these problems. Okay, I often get asked the question, well, which of the practices go with the content targets and the content standards? And instead, I would ask you to almost flip that around and say, okay, if I'm thinking about problem solving, and I know that it contains 1, 5, 7, and 8 for my standards for mathematical practices, and now I know what that looks like as far as assessment targets of what I want the kids really to do, when would problem solving be appropriate to my content? So what of my content do I want to pull into that problem solving process? And so it says here that 80% of the embedded content will come from the following clusters. So these are the clusters that tend to lend themselves more closely to the problem solving process. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a side-by-side on a screen, because I want us to be able to look at that and really make that assessment of how that is done. So let me just pull this out for a second here. And so then if I go down and I see I have so I'm going to put my targets over here, and I'm going to go back over to this page and go back to my claim 2. So we said that these were the primary standard targets, clusters, chunks of standards, right, that we're going to use to solve problems. So if I look at 30AA, right here it says represent and solve problems. So that makes sense that that would be included in the problem solving. Then 30AD, solve problems involving the 4 operations. So again, it says right there. So that makes sense why I would solve problems there. 3NBA, use place value, understanding the properties of operations to perform, multi-digit arithmetic. 3MDA, so I'm going to go down here, solve problems again involving measurement. 3MDB, represent and interpret data. That usually goes along with problem solving. 3MD3 is geometric measurement and understand the concepts of area and relate area to multiplication and addition. And then our last one is 3MBD, geometric measurement, recognize perimeters as an attribute of plane figures and distinguish between linear and area measurements. So I think it's easy to see that they really did identify the clusters that tend to lend themselves more to the problem solving. It doesn't mean we're not going to problem solve in any of the other clusters, but we're going to focus on the content that really lends itself well to be embedded. And another place that you can see that is in the deep target document. So if you come over to here, and you'll see that the chunks of where that information is, see, solve problems involving measurement. So we've got it there. And then represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. So you can, oops, sorry, I was in this one here. Represent, I was hovering over claim 3. I didn't mean to be. I meant right here over problem solving, which is claim 2. So represent and solve problems. And then we come down here, solve problems again. And so then this one, but not so much, right? Because this is a supporting one, supporting cluster. Solve problems. So it doesn't mean we wouldn't ever solve problems in the other clusters, but as a classroom teacher, if I'm running short on time, or maybe whatever, or if I'm looking for a way to differentiate, like maybe I'm working with some kiddos on problem solving within 3OAD here, and then, but I'm like, hey, but I want to maybe differentiate, then I can have some kiddos that have the problem solving down. I can have them do some problem solving within 30AB and 30AC. So just some different tools on here and some different things that we can do with it. So I want to go back to our target page here. So, and then that little asterisk just means up above. Oh, when I came back in here, sorry, I had scrolled too far. When I come back in here, I noticed that this asterisk means that they're supporting standards up above. So those are the standards up above where you're going to have the S in the little bracket. The other thing down here is the achievement level descriptors. And for those of you that attended the December Claim 1, we talked a little bit about achievement level descriptors and how that's kind of my ruler. That's how I'm going to decide if they're a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'll also show you in the standards based grading rubric where we also have some threshold here. So if we go back to this document here and we scroll all the way down to part 5, so getting all the way past claim 3 and 4, this part 5 walks you through this standard-based grading rubric to align the assessment targets for claims 1 through 4, including threshold descriptors. So you might be a little, where do I find those? So let's go back to the Iowa core page here. And if I back out and go back to that summative assessment page, I'm going to come down here to the bottom, standard-based grading rubric, and I'm going to open up this document. So it starts with 3rd grade and it goes 3, 4, 5, and the standards for mathematical practice and problem solving were written by grade bands when they wrote this information. So I have to scroll all the way past 3. I have to scroll all the way past 4. I scroll all the way past 5. And then I notice that at the top here, it says grade 3 through 5. So we have the overall claim that says we're college and career ready. And then, because this is my grade bands, I start getting into that claim 2 and claim 4. So these achievement level descriptors here are exactly what's on that other page that we just looked at. The really great thing that I love about this document is then it takes it and breaks it down, not just from overall, but if I'm looking here and so claim 2, problem solving and modeling data analysis. So it says, looking at those targets, what should my students be able to do in their work to have these different, do I tell if a student's work is a 2 or a student's work is a 3? And maybe it's kind of in between and I really don't know. And the really great part about that is then I can go down to the end of this little section here and it has these thresholds. So it says students who just leave or are just about enter level 2 should be able to do these skills. A student who enters level 3 should be able to do these skills. And these are not content things, right? These are skills that are around that problem solving. Okay, and students that enter level 4 should be able to do these. So you might say, well, okay, that's all great, but how do I know what those things look like? Well, if we go back to our page here, and if I'm a 3rd grade teacher and I go into, I know, hey, we're going to have some problem solving around target A, then I can go into this document here where I have all that great claim 1 information, and I can go down here to claim 2, and I can see some examples of what some of those problem solving questions would look like with those content standards from up above that are in target A, right? The content standards embedded in that problem solving, and it gives me a rubric. and it also gives me an appropriate response type. So example 1, 2, 3, and we're going to look for some more examples because we really want to have some great examples for our standards for mathematical practices. So that's most of the information that I wanted to share with you. We do have the slides up on here, and I use the slides for the live recording, and so a lot of this was getting that assessment information. But also on the slides, we have the link to the Iowa Core Standards, that assessment tool. And then you'll also find the standard-based grading rubric on the slide deck here. Remember, you can go in and take a practice test, and that's a really great exercise just to see what some more of those problem-solving strategies would look like. We are starting to build up our G+ communities, and you'll notice our different grade bands here. So this is why I wanted that information from you, was so that we could have those different groups, and we'll eventually be able to push out that information. Also, we have an ICTM Save the Date, October 9th in 2017. We have many exciting potential sessions, principles to action, growth mindset. We'll have some universal screeners and progress monitoring, teacher leadership and math coaching, computer science, and I'm sure we'll have some sessions on the Iowa Core in our continued strive to implement that. As a last pitch, we also have that June professional development, where if you click on this right here, it will take you to the flyer, and you can find those registration links and go in and sign up and register. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. You'll see there's some people still checking it out there. So it's really exciting to see all the interest, and I mean, I can't wait for June to come here. We're going to have so much fun and have so many great conversations. Also, something that came out of our live session was a question. I do want to encourage you to go in here and take the survey for me, because that's how I get great feedback. But something else that I put over here was this little learning chunks. And one of the things we were talking about is, why is only money taught in second grade? Currently, this is the only learning chunk that we had. And when I get a question from a AEA consultant, or from an instructional coach, or a teacher, or whoever sends it to me, and I don't really know. And so like this one, I was like, well, why is money only taught in second grade? And I thought, that's an interesting one. And I think that would be best answered by Jason and Bill. So I just emailed them, and so they emailed me back. Jason emailed me back his response, and then I waited for Bill, and Bill agreed with everything Jason said, and then I linked some additional resources. So if there's questions like these that come up, let me know, because I have several avenues to reach out across the nation so that we can work smarter, not harder, and we can have just some really great resources for teachers and educators to make really great instructional decisions for our kiddos. And I think that was about all that we talked about in the 2 online sessions. So again, we'll have everything linked here. And if you have questions or concerns, please reach out, let me know, and I'll do my best to try to help you with that. Thanks, everyone.